You are tuned in to the FowlWeather podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
Welcome to another episode in the Young Waterfowl Professional Series. All of us in the profession of waterfowl and wetland science, conservation, and management came from somewhere. These are the stories of young, passionate conservationists that have made their passion for the ducks into a career. Today we have another great guest. We welcome Ethan Dittmer to the FowlWeather podcast Young Waterfowl Professional Series. Ethan is actually our last guest of this series for the summer as we head into the fall season and start to talk more about ducks, duck hunting, and the duck migration forecast every single week. Ethan is a PhD student at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, working with Dr. Mark Vrtiska. Vrtiska. Sorry. This is the authentic portion of it. He went to Mississippi State, and I know Mark really well, and so sometimes you just pronounce stuff wrong when you're live. But anyway, Dr. Mark Vrtiska, Dr. J. VonBank, and Tom Bidrowski, and Tom is part of the state of Kansas. He's their waterfowl biologist. And so Ethan is working on the Southeast Kansas Mallard GPS project. This research focuses on the wintering ecology of mallards in the region, specifically their use of public lands, sanctuary areas, and various land cover types, as well as their broader movement patterns within and beyond the Southeast Kansas region. Ethan pursued a career in waterfowl research driven by his passion for duck hunting on public land, a boy after my own heart, and is committed to conducting applied research that supports contemporary waterfowl management and conservation. And I will tell you, Ethan, that is a tall task, and I appreciate it because you and I are kind of the same person. So welcome to the FowlWeather podcast, Young Waterfowl Professional Series.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity and happy to be here and chat today. That was a lovely introduction.
A little flubbed, but you know, it's authentic, right? So.
Oh yeah, it can't beat real, that's for sure.
So really glad to have you here. And I always like to start out the Young Waterfowl Professional Series is a lot about thinking about people like myself that ended up in careers in waterfowl, but really kind of getting, I think, the older guard to understand how the young folks think about the field, how they're getting into it. And then also I will have my students from my waterfowl ecology and management class listen to these if they want to. I don't force them to, but just a little bit, it helps folks understand how to get into the field of waterfowl, kind of science, conservation, and management, and the wetland portion of it too. But a lot of us never had like a single event that really got us into a career in waterfowl. I started out in like what people would consider a hill country. It was like deer, turkey country. We had wood ducks, we had mallards, we had Canada geese. But I mean, I'll tell you, Ethan, we shot a duck one time and my dad was part of the parts collection survey. And until we got the result back, I was like in my early teens. We just called it the scraggly duck. And it was a juvenile female gadwall that we shot, right? And so I think, like, I didn't come into the field being a full-blown waterfowl person, and I found it later. And so there was like this accumulation of events in my life that just made me super nuts about ducks in general and wetlands and the people that pursue those ducks and conserve those wetlands. So that's a long introduction to a question that basically, what was your path and your inspiration for where you sit today as a PhD student working on some pretty cool stuff in Kansas?
Yeah, probably overall somewhat similar to what you had for me. Growing up, I grew up in north central Illinois, kind of on a farm in the country. I had a twin brother, and we grew up hunting quite a bit, but mostly for deer, squirrels, small game, stuff like that. That's kind of what my dad focused on. And so from, honestly, younger than I can even remember, I know we started deer hunting. So that's pretty young. And then all the way through grade school, we kind of kept along that path. And so continued deer hunting, but we got into archery hunting and we go out on our own. Not a lot of waterfowl hunting. Once we got into high school, we lived on a farm, so we had some cornfields. We'd always see the geese fly over, and I don't know what inspired it, but one day my brother and I said, "Hey, we should go try to see if we can shoot those geese." And we had no idea what we were doing. My dad had no idea what we should do, and eventually we figured that out. Made some friends in high school, and we started doing a little bit of duck hunting, but it was just going to like a slough next to some railroads, hoping to shoot some wood ducks. Didn't really know what we were doing, but we all like being in the outdoors. But man, once we finished high school, I started college for my first semester at Loyola University in Chicago. And still up until that point, I had never been introduced to the concept of like having a career, let alone a degree focused on anything in wildlife, not just ducks or waterfowl, but anything at all. I just didn't know it was a possibility to be like a wildlife biologist or a wildlife researcher. But I kind of started to figure that out when I was at Loyola for that semester. Great school, no real complaints, but just kind of hit me of I was thinking about going into pre-med and I was like, this just doesn't feel right. Being in Chicago, just didn't feel right and felt like I needed to change the pace, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so transferred down to Southern Illinois University Carbondale with my brother. And that's a wildlife heavy kind of forestry school. It's in the Shawnee National Forests down there at the bottom of the state of Illinois. And I would say that's kind of when things really started where I saw opportunities and where I could take my career if I wanted to. But yeah, I'd really say up until the beginning of college, I hunted ducks a little bit, liked the outdoors, but as far as career and education, I had no idea it was an option.
Yeah, and your story is not different from a fair number of folks, right? I feel like we've got so many, and I don't want to crap on the people that run deer hunting podcasts because I'm friends with some of them, but you could trip and do pretty well with a deer hunting podcast because there's so many deer hunters, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And now we're inundated with waterfowl hunting podcasts, and which is fine. I love all my brethren; they do a great job, and it's a cool community. I communicate with a lot of them. But the reality is out there, a lot of folks don't find the waterfowl hunting bug till later that are in our career. And then there's a lot of listeners that are like, man, I've been doing it since I was like 8, right? And we do get folks that come into the field that have been duck hunting for a long time. But I found it very inspirational to find it kind of in my, I'd say, early 20s is really when I got into it, and I've been growing in it ever since. But you mentioned Southern Illinois as a part of your life, and then I know you went on to a master's degree. But in that period, your professional mentors, I mean, mine were Bill Edelman in Southeast Missouri State, who was a hunter, but not a strong hunter. He mostly did rail research. And then I moved on with Scott Petrie, Dave Ankney, Rick Kaminsky, a lot of names that folks will recognize over the years. But you must have had folks that really kind of shaped your career and then inspired you once you kind of got that bug, and folks that continue to inspire you. So a little bit about those people and how, I guess one of the things I've asked this all along on the Young Waterfowl Professional podcast here, but how that relationship, a little personal stuff, maybe not just who inspired you, right? But that personal relationship and like how that worked, the give and take, and how that melded you to be the person you are now, I guess.
Yeah. The path I took once I started college was great, and I'm very thankful for it. And I'll get to it, but the most important part of it definitely was the people and the mentors. Because like I said, I had no idea what was going on. But yeah, once we got down to Southern Illinois University Carbondale, like I said, with my brother, we just kind of started looking around and we were like, there's all sorts of opportunity for hunting. And one of the things we saw that we did not have back home was, I'm not going to say the areas and stuff, but some public ground where you could do bottomland hardwood flooded timber hunting. And so, man, the first fall we had when we were down there, my brother and I said, like, we need to go check this place out. And so, an opener, we went and we just kind of walked the levees, seeing what was going on. We had no idea what we were doing. We like went off the edge of a levee and I think we shot a wood duck. But we were like, okay, we should go back the next day with one of our buddies. I actually have a GoPro video of this, but we went out. Oh man, we got lost in the dark. We had no idea what we were doing, but we were walking through this bottomland hardwood stand that was flooded, looking for a timber hole. Finally found it. Thank God. And man, that was, I'll never forget the hunt. We had set up, and right when shooting time started coming along, it was just mallards piling in into the hole through the trees. And man, we were kids in the candy store, like yelling, just couldn't control it. We were so excited. And that was definitely the point where I was like, okay, I really like ducks, really like duck hunting. This is awesome. And so it was, I mean, it was probably only a week or so later, my brother and I were talking and we were like, we should look some more about what type of waterfowl research or maybe degrees are available here. And because we started off in, it was a forestry program with like a wildlife emphasis, but it was mostly forestry. And so we were looking on the websites and we saw this professor named Mike Eicholz. And we emailed him and just said, like, hey, we want to come talk to you. So we went and chatted with him. And that first meeting, I remember he said, like, we were thinking about transferring to a zoology major, which is more wildlife focused. And he said, if you guys both transfer over to zoology, I will do my very best to get you a job processing wings for the wing bee. Because Southern Illinois Carbondale does that.
Yep.
We were like, okay, but he's like, you have to do the transfer though. Like, I want to see you guys are serious about this. So we transferred over into zoology and started processing duck wings. And man, from that point forward, I had so many opportunities working with Eicholz and some of his grad students down there. It was unbelievable. And by both him and his grad students really, I mean, they shaped who I am today, as far as in the professional fields. We processed the duck wings. Down the road, I got the chance to design a human dimensions based hunter survey at one of the public duck hunting sites in the region. Drone projects where we were surveying ducks with drones, all these different opportunities. And alongside that, for the academic sense, one, we were doing some work and some research, but got advice to make sure we got summer jobs. And so I worked in Kansas doing wetland management for one summer, ended up working for Delta Waterfowl one summer, and got invited to present my research at conferences. And so Mississippi Flyway meeting, got to go to the Duck Symposium up in Winnipeg. And this was all as an undergrad. And
Yeah,
I felt,
that's incredible because most folks, I try to drag students along where I can. And I kind of say drag because sometimes they're like, whatever, I don't know, like they're undergrads, but it sounded like you were into it and
oh,
and really on top of it already. And that is amazing before you even go to your master's degree, right?
yeah, it was, I mean, I knew at the time it was like great for me and I loved it, but looking back, it was, I mean, invaluable to be able to,
For
before
sure.
I start my master's work, to be able to say, like, I've done some independent research, I've given talks, I've built my slides, I've made posters, invaluable.
And that's a lesson right there for folks in undergrad is don't waste your years. I've got a sophomore right now from Syracuse University working in our lab every single week doing Canada goose measurements independently and kicking butt. And I'm going to work with her a lot during the semester as a stable isotope component. Actually, we're working with Rob Wilson, Dr. Rob Wilson from your university on the genetics portion of the goose stuff. So it's like
Awesome.
that whole thing of trying to get these undergrad students into the network, which Dr. Mike Eicholz was doing with you as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
super
mean,
important.
Yeah, doing that work, like one, you get the experience, but you end up meeting people along the way, whether it's other professors or managers, biologists, or even grad students that we run into down the road. Invaluable, and it definitely really helped shape kind of my thinking going forward for sure, especially having a mentor like Eicholz. He's a smart guy, phenomenal at critical thinking, and I like
Hmm.
to think I might have picked up a little bit of that from him. Not all of it, but some of it.
I missed having him because he was supposed to come to the symposium you and I were recently at Winus Point Marsh Conservancy with it was a very casual grad student symposium, and I was really hoping Mike was there because he always shows up with this like novel idea that he just wrote on a napkin on a plane, right?
Yeah,
and
Mike's a
makes people
character.
think about like I think he's just pushing buttons, right? He's like, "Hey,
Yes.
think about this stuff. It might be different than the way you've thought about stuff previously." And I've always appreciated that a lot, and that's the type of stuff Dave Ankney, Scott Petrie did, and always moved my career forward. So hopefully you were left with that kind of novel thinking as well, and not just finding the next answer, right?
Yeah.
So, from Southern Illinois, what was your next stop, Ethan?
Oh, so I graduated my undergrad the spring that COVID hit, 2020, I believe that was. And I was supposed to go work for Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska, doing some emperor goose and speckled eider work. But with COVID, I wasn't able to go up there. And so I ended up that summer teleworking from home. Same job position, I guess, but I was at home, which wasn't great. Can't say I enjoyed it, but because I was home, I had cell service, I had a computer. I saw a posting from Dr. Doug Osborne. He
Mm-hmm.
was trying to hire two or three master's students down there in Arkansas, University of Arkansas at Monticello. And I emailed him the application, and the posting was kind of open, if you will, of what the projects were going to be. And in my application, I sent him an idea of if I had the position, here's the project I'd like to do. And he ended up calling me. We had a chat. We chatted a bunch about this idea for the project and kind of what we wanted it to be. And from there, that fall, I started my master's down in Arkansas.
Yeah, so the point there is put yourself out there. So,
Yep.
I'm going to be the naive person here. I want to throw out that no, you didn't do white-fronted geese, did you?
Did not know.
Okay, so what was the project? I was pretty sure I had that one wrong, Ethan. So I did my
Now, all
homework fairly
good.
well. I knew you went to Monticello, but wasn't sure the full
Yeah.
project. So go for it.
Yeah.
I
My master's
apologize.
research, it focused on White River National Wildlife Refuge.
Hmm.
The long and the short of it was we wanted to get an understanding of within that area, kind of focused around the refuge. It's huge. I
Hmm.
believe it's 160,000 acres of nearly contiguous bombland hardwood forest. And surrounding that is a lot of private, whether it be rice or really fragmented stands of woods. But hunting pressure, both public and private, is probably near the highest in the country, if not the highest. It's pretty intense. So it was a great study area to look at within that very pressured landscape. How did mallards use both public land and private land with a focus on sanctuary,
That's
on
right.
that refuge and surrounding? They had a few different variations of sanctuary. Some was fully closed, some they only allowed hunting a few days a week, etc. And so that's what we really wanted to see of how it was laid out within the refuge is a sanctuary area, whether it be fully closed or maybe open to hunting a few days a week. Do we see mallards responding to those areas similarly or differently? And that was the main focus of the project. And that was really driven, I guess, the concept of the project of from my hunting experience in undergrad. Most of the places we hunted had a closed area, and there was always a curiosity, both hunting or just watching ducks fly around in general, of how are they used in these areas. And man, it was a great study area for a project like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So what'd you find in short? Like, what were the final results from that then? And I know you've covered this on other podcasts because now you're jogging my memory from listening to other
Nah,
folks. So
it's all good. It was a great project. I enjoy talking about it. In
yeah.
short, what we found, let's see, Down there, mallards don't move much once they arrive there in the winter. That's kind of their home base. Whether they arrive early or late, that's kind of, for the most part, where they're stopping at. Very repetitive patterns of daytime, they like closed areas. Not really food emphasis during the day, but during the night, they'll go to private lands where there's rice, for example, and stay there for the whole night and fly back to the sanctuary during the day, back and forth, back and forth. But a big thing that we saw in that area, like I said, there was different layouts and configurations of types of closed areas. Really, what the mallards used was the spatial sanctuary areas that were closed entirely, which looking back now, I guess isn't surprising. But when we started the project, we really had no idea what to expect. There'd been some research done in the past looking at questions like that, but nothing very recently with the type of technology we have today with the GPS transmitters. It was fairly fine scale. And yeah, that was the biggest takeaway is they really like being in those closed areas during the day, and they like complete avoidance of people. So the places that were hunted a few days a week or somewhat reduced disturbance, it didn't really seem to make a difference to them. They avoided those areas just the same.
So two things here we found, and it's just on the feeding at night thing, and this is a little different. I think you and I maybe talked about it briefly, but when we had telemetry units on ducks, black ducks and mallards on eastern Long Island, where there's a lot of ambient light, they were field feeding in the pitch black of night, what you and I would consider like midnight. They're in fields. I'm like, I talked to my grad, so I'm like, can we just get accuracy on these? She's like, no, these black ducks are in these fields every night in the middle, in dry field feeding on cut cornfields. So I could see feeding in a wetland at night, right? But I'm guessing like eastern Long Island, it's more rural than what you think, right? There's mansions on the beach, all that. People come out of New York City and they build these, second homes and all that stuff. And folks are fighting it, trying to keep kind of a rural culture there. You're up against the sea. You can't, build your cornfields out any further than the ocean. But yeah, these birds are actually feeding at night in these cornfields. I'm thinking there's not purchase for owls and other things where they get picked off too much. There's not nighttime predators maybe. So interesting there. That's something completely different than as you said. Yeah, we see ducks feed in wetlands all the time at night, right? As a hunting pressure avoidance thing. And then the second thing that you kind of said was that the spatial sanctuary matters a lot more. And I've thought about this a lot from the migration and people are still shooting ducks kind of concept and the weather kind of concept is that, the marked ducks that you've had there for periods of time are feeding in these places, but people are still shooting ducks during that time period.
Absolutely.
Right. And so when people say ducks need 7 days until they go back to their pattern, and maybe that's what your stuff showed. I can't remember if it was you. It was maybe Western Tennessee folks. But I'm always like, yeah, but during that period, people are still shooting mallards. So where are those ducks coming from is what I always think about. They're either ducks that made a mistake that are a small portion of your data set, or they're migrators. And I think they're mostly migrators. So that's where I always go back to the weather severity index we produce and say, the migrators really, during these times when the local birds have figured it out, are your ticket to having good hunts. And those I've gotten down to those events, like the real big migration events, are either 3 to 5 or 5 to 8. It depends on the year. And then there's like a trickle thing that also happens, right?
Yep.
But that if all these local ducks have figured out where they're safe and where they're not, and they're not getting shot, then the ones you're shooting have got to be the movers.
Absolutely. No, I think you're spot on there, both from the research I've done, but then just my personal experience with hunting or driving around watching ducks. The ones that have been there for a while, they haven't figured out. But like you said, even some of our transmitter birds, they do make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time when they quote unquote make one of those mistakes, it's during a strong weather event, normally a lot of cold. It kind of throws everything out the window, if you will, for their previous patterns. But But yeah, in general, those strong weather events coming through, it's bringing in ducks that are not familiar with the landscape. So I think you're spot on there for sure.
Yeah, and then like rain events. I think rain events completely restructure what the landscape looks like to them, like the water. They get very accustomed to that
Yes.
kind of water imprint. They get up in the air, they see a pond, they see a river, a slough, a bayou, and then they know how to navigate to the next place. And when it just goes bonkers and there's water everywhere, they just lose their orientation kind of completely on that. I think they're very visual animals, and that's why we find when we have these water events that it's not always new ducks showing up either. It's some of that is it, but the local like wet events are just birds getting disoriented, but also trying to maybe discover new places to feed and getting duped by a decoy or a blind.
I mean, yeah, especially with, I mean, mallards are incredibly adaptable. The project I'm on now, I'd say huge thing. We have a big rain event. It's not really flooding per se that drives the changes, but I guess accumulation of sheet water. So flooding, if you will, but not necessarily out of a river. But I mean, man, if it's in the general vicinity of where they've been hanging out at, there's a big rain event and you have some sheet water over some fields. And it doesn't even have to be like contiguous water. Just you can look across a field and say like, oh, there's a good amount of standing water here and about throughout the field. I mean, you'll see mallards piled up on top of it. And in my opinion, they're being adaptable. Probably they were making their normal flights as they normally do. And they're like, oh, look at all that habitat down there we can go feed in right now. And they all follow in and access it.
Yeah, so that's totally not totally counter, but it is somewhat counter to what I just said, which these are the types of discussions we have, and we're in one right now of, like I said, disorients them, but they also know, okay, I use the word know, it's not really true, but they respond to these wet spots in fields where moist soil plants grow. There's weedy stuff. There's a new food resource that now has water on it that nobody else has been able to take advantage of before. And mallards are really adaptable. They're very good at finding food. And so they're just following that food, right? Following food, avoiding, and they think maybe avoiding pressure too by going to a new spot as well where they haven't been shot at before. So sometimes those two things combine. It's not really, there is some level of maybe disorientation to the landscape, but they're also exploiting these new food resources, which if you as a hunter are good at being on those food resources at that time, you can exploit, right? So if you know where stuff floods on rain events or flood river events, you can usually find ducks, and seasoned hunters know that, right? Like those are things like seasoned hunters watch river gauges. They know when their new hole floods. They know when a field floods. And I've got spots locally. I hunt them normally at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the right river rise because I know how to read the gauge. Ethan, I am such a nerd. I run a linear regression of how much the river is rising over so many hours, and I know what it has to get at for ducks to show up in it.
Yeah.
And I have pulled into the parking lot, and I'm pretty sure I'm watching the first 300 to 400 birds circle that hole with water in it that are just starting to land in it. I mean, I'm tuning my own horn a little bit. It's been a few years. Some of this stuff, other people, they haven't figured it out. But now since like COVID, dudes just hunt the same place every single day, no matter what. And so there's like already people there. But for a while we had it dialed in. But it's fun. I like that discussion of like when that weather changes either locally or at the regional level, what these birds do. So let's bite in a bit to your research in southeast Kansas, and talk a little bit about, photo period versus weather migrators and all that stuff that people love to discuss as duck hunters. But give us a rundown of your work, to give us a feel for, what your project is in southeast Kansas. Give us kind of a general description. I mean, you're working with folks from Nebraska and then Tom Bidrowski, who is the waterfowl person there for Kansas, and it's called is it the Southeast? Give me the name of your project.
We just call it the Southeast Kansas Mallard GPS project. Kind of a mouthful, but gets the point across.
Yeah, no, you're good. So just a general description and what you folks hope to learn from that.
Yeah, so I've been on the project for I think 2.5 years now. We've done two field seasons. Kind of the gist of it is Tom Bidrowski in Kansas. I guess this is the one that conceived it and helped get it all off the ground. But Southeast Kansas, it's a pretty, at least in my opinion, unique and special region.
Hmm.
It supports pretty decent chunk of ducks during the fall and winter, and accounts for, I believe it's 23% or so of the state's annual mallard harvests. It's a pretty big cultural thing there, duck hunting, but in particular mallards. Long and the short of it is, there's been a lot of ducks there for a long time, but there's really been no research to understand how are ducks using the region, both for within it, so looking at like habitat selection or use of different public and private properties, but also if they winter there for the full winter or if they move further south. And so, kind of to get a grasp on the overall ecology of mallards in the region,
Hmm.
that's what this project was designed for, to hopefully guide future management and regulations. So, like for example, regulation side, season dates, zones, stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's the gist of why we're doing the project. Kind of our overall objectives for now. We're looking at during the winter time, selection of the public and private property focused on some sanctuary area use as well as land cover types. So moist soil versus open water versus flooded ag. Um, going to try to tie into that the recursive aspect I talked about that I saw with my Arkansas stuff of mallards really going back to the same places day after day after day. So we want to try to incorporate that in some of our modeling processes. And also in this project, the GPS transmitters we use also take sensor readings, so they can tell the tilts of the
Hmm.
device. And
Hmm.
long story short, you can use that similarly to how your iPhone can tell if you're walking or running. You can look at different behaviors that are associated with GPS locations. So we want to look at that during the fall and winter. And then also, like you mentioned before, there are regional transitional probabilities. So, for example, during the fall and winter, what's the probability of a mallard that's in southeast Kansas, marked by us, going to Arkansas? And what's the overall probability of that? And what factors, for example, rainfall, cold temperatures, ice, make that more of a probability versus not? Um, and then I'd say another objective we have is similar to our first one, but just looking at within Southeast Kansas, their overall transitional probabilities. So not selection, but probability of going from different land cover types and public and privates,
Hmm.
and see how weather and other factors might influence changes in their transitional probabilities. Finally, it's an interesting one we're still trying to fully work out now, but spring migration ecology, which in my opinion, there's been a good chunk of research on that, especially as of late.
Hmm.
One thing we want to do to kind of get a feel of what the future might look like, as well as today. Throughout the fall and winter, we see some mallards decide to hunker down and stay in the region, no matter how
Hmm.
cold and nasty it gets, while some will jump further south during those cold weather events. So they'll go to Arkansas or Oklahoma. We want to try to compare between those groups, if you will, the mallards that decide to stay versus the ones that go.
Hmm.
Their spring migration, are they migrating at the same speed? Are they making kind of the same decisions along the way? And then, as far as when they nest, can we see any differences between those two groups while they're nesting? So that's kind of the
I,
overall objectives for the project.
Yeah, I like this because these are things I think we think about a lot. And I'm going to jump into like just a thought exercise here. And man, I went through it with Larry Reynolds years ago when I was on the tech section for Maine and we had this joint meeting. And I was also then, after that, I ended up in Mississippi and sat in a room with Larry and a think tank of people thinking about, is migration. And this was back in 2008. So it was after kind of that low period. It's kind of a low period in mallard populations like we're in now. and people got thinking about like, are we just shooting all the ones that want to migrate, and then all the remaining ones genetically are different? You're not going to be able to get at that with the number of birds you have tagged, but do the ones you have tagged have a predisposition for that stay north, using a different habitat than those that kind of go south, right? Is that decision? I don't think you can get at that, but like I like this concept of like, do we have different types of mallards out there, and are the ones that go south just getting shot at a higher rate, and then we're changing the genetic makeup of the population? And I'm in no way am I thinking that your GPS birds would ever enable us to get to that answer. But there's people that think about that and talk about that stuff, and I'd love to be able to answer that type of question. I think that these things are so mixed in how they react each year to this stuff that, and genetically they're mixed enough that I don't think we can find a bird that's like programmed to stay north, unless it's pushed way harder than what we've seen with weather changes in general. So that was something not on script, Ethan, and we'll jump into your study here in a second. So sorry for throwing you maybe a curveball, but it's just, I think, a fun conversation in general.
I've heard the discussion before. I mean, I haven't seen anyone try to actually answer that. I mean, from my past experience, both on this project, my stuff in Arkansas and other projects, I mean, we could, and people do have the data to probably ask those questions. If you're marking GPS ducks, taking blood samples, which we did in Arkansas, we are here as well. But I'd say the biggest point I'd make, at least anyone in this general vicinity of the world that's done mallard GPS projects, you mark your birds in the fall and winter. You have a number of those that survive till the next fall and winter. If there is some type of I don't know, genetic reasoning for whether how far south they go by the certain date, you would expect to see the birds you marked, let's say in Arkansas, for example. A lot of the birds we marked down there were before duck hunting season started. And so if there is a lot of truth to this genetic theory, you'd expect those birds the next winter to be back down there, the same location at the same date. And I haven't read analyses on it, but I can definitely tell you that that second winter is extremely variable. They're not making it down south at the exact same time, the exact same area for every single bird. There's a lot of variability both in the timing that they move south the following winter, and then actually where they end up going. There's considerable variability that I've seen.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so some of that's probably what resources they run into. I mean, each one of these birds has, just like all of us as humans, we have all different genetic makeup, and then what the environment throws at us on an annual basis is different. Food-wise, I'm not saying it's just weather. It's like food, it's pressure, it's like a series of things that have happened to them for months, right? I don't know. I think back in my life, I've had good years and bad years too. So,
yeah.
But that's interesting, and that's where I kind of get at. I think there's a lot of environmental impact on what these birds do and what they end up doing. So,
I mean, absolutely. Like people, this is just theories, but people have asked me before, like, what do you think could have made these mallards you caught? And I'm going to say Southeast Arkansas again, where my master's work was. What made them come down here this early? And I'd say the simple answer is we don't know for sure, but you could think about it. Let's say there was a big group of mallards up in North Dakota at the exact right location when a very strong early freak snowstorm came through. You could theoretically conclude, well, maybe that was so intense, they decided instead of trying to weather that out, they just moved south to avoid it. And they went all the way down in one go. So I'd say a lot of variability for sure. They're adaptable creatures, to say the least.
Yeah, and when people say, "Hey, I got a ton of ducks at my club on opening day in Arkansas, and so mallards are calendar migrants," I'm like, okay, well, the ones that you saw might have reacted to the variation from photo period to weather differently. And so,
Yes.
yeah, you're going to have ducks. Like That's why your duck season opens so late. That's why it doesn't open on October 1st.
Yeah.
Because at some point there's going to be birds that are there. But the reality is, over the last couple of years at least, I mean, people are there. Yeah, there's not as many ducks. We've got low duck populations, but man, it's been pretty damn mild. And so
Hmm.
that's to some extent what's keeping ducks north too. And so we've got tons of stuff on this on the podcast. We've tested the weather, against photo period and such, and weather always wins. And those two things are tied to each other. Like as days get shorter, it gets colder,
Yeah.
right? But when we find that weather is a better predictor, it just means that when the weather happens earlier, right? Even though that photo period is trucking along at about the same pace, the decrease in day length, when you get the weather earlier, you get ducks earlier,
Yep.
right? And so,
Yep.
yeah, those two are tied together. But the fact that weather comes up as the best predictor doesn't say that photo period doesn't have an influence. It just says that overlaid on top of it, it does a better job of saying when, and that makes when ducks are going to be where they're going to be, and that makes sense because you don't want to be a duck that gets caught in bad weather because then that
Yeah.
affects your survival and all that stuff. And so they react to weather based on like these long-term evolutionary mechanisms, but then it's adjusted by the conditions that they get, pushed at them, right? So
Yeah.
why don't you jump in a little bit to your stuff in Kansas? I think you had a little slideshow that I think we'll try to share and see how everybody on the internet world and has ever done a remote meeting knows how this stuff goes. So let's see
Yeah.
if
Let's see how it
Ethan can.
works today. Oh,
I gave you the capacity to share, and for those of you listening, um, on the podcast alone, we do have a YouTube channel. So if you want to see the graphics from it, you can. Yeah, it's looking good, Ethan, to me. So you can go
sweet.
online at this point, and Ethan and I will try to describe very well what we're looking at, so that you don't have to interpret it. But if you want to see these cool images and stuff he's produced with these GPS marked mallards, go to the YouTube channel at FowlWeather and find us, and you'll be able to see all this online too. So Ethan, give it a roll and let us know. And if I feel like there needs to be like a description of what we're looking at, I'll jump in. Okay.
Yeah, sweet. So yeah, this will just be like a real quick overview of some of the broad themes we've seen. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but we've done 2 field seasons. In total, we've marked just about 130 adult female mallards with GPS units, and alongside that, we've banded a little bit over 1,700 mallards as well. And so I guess for a broad overview, what we're looking at here on the screen, kind of a map showing Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas, and overlaid on that 2 separate maps for each of our field seasons. Kind of our first field season and all of the GPS locations we collected from our deployments, which take place November through December, and then it runs through February 15th. So on the one side, we have our first field season. The other side, we have our second field season this past winter. You can see a little bit just glancing at them. It's not the most informative map. Each one probably has 350,000 GPS locations on it. You can't really tell that too well, but kind of paints a picture. The southeast zone is outlined in gold down there in Kansas. The vast majority of our locations are collected within that, but you can see on both of them some variation outside of that. So some birds hopping down through Missouri towards Arkansas. Even our first field season, about a week after we deployed some mallards at 2 separate sites, we had some individuals decide to fly back north to Nebraska. So each year, a little bit of variation, but some somewhat consistent themes. The Neosho River flows kind of, I don't know if I want to say down the center, but through that southeast zone. And it's very prevalent when cold weather conditions occur for mallards to tend to want to follow that Neosho River system down, kind of into Oklahoma. And then it runs into Arkansas, where it's the Arkansas River, and follow that down in through Arkansas. So a little bit different, like you can see from the maps for both field seasons, but in general, kind of the same picture.
Is that the Arkansas River on both years? The scale's a little different there. The kind of the line where they kind of there's one bird that in the second year. So the years here, so folks are looking at 23-24 and 24-25. So these are the last two duck seasons. And in Arkansas, there's like this plot of dots that runs along like mid-Arkansas. And the scales are a little different because in the second year, there's a bird that went to Mississippi. So Mississippi and Louisiana are included.
Yep.
But that's the Arkansas River in both of those, is it not? Along there where they kind of stop.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it depends on where you're looking at, but kind of the, I don't know, the most prevalent theme of settling. Like I said, the map doesn't show it that great, but they're following the Arkansas River. The first year, so 23-24 duck season, we'll get into some future slides, but the cold event we saw in January was, I'd say more rapid, more extreme. And so in result, more of our birds decided to move further south. And so it probably looks a little bit more prevalent in that first year, but in general, it was about the same.
And that's a lot of east-west as you're going. Actually, it's a lot of east out of in the first year, certainly, right?
Yep.
So trying to find paths east, I think, along that kind of freeze line as quickly as possible. And probably looks to me like using a lot of river systems, really.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, when the cold events occur, they're really following and sometimes using the river systems, whether it be to try to get out of Dodge or to weather out the event itself. They're trying to search for open water, and that's what they can find. Most of them are pretty small rivers and just looking for some open moving water.
Yeah, and I've always said this is like, when times get tough, you either run out of food or the weather kind of pushes you. You don't always have to go directly south. You can move east-west too along that freeze line. And people always forget that. Folks in Tennessee, as you move out of West Tennessee and up rivers and stuff, this was biologists I talked with years ago at a FowlWeather meeting said, yeah, we've got some, really nice moist soil stuff and some flooded crop stuff up rivers out of West Tennessee. And when they start to run out of food or it freezes, they move up those rivers, and all of a sudden our shooting gets amazing like the last 2 weeks of season. So a lot of little nuanced stuff that goes on with these birds. But this is a cool map I think you're trying to show, and I think you do show very well the annual variation in where these birds go from southeast Kansas as the season goes on. So I'll let you roll with the rest of your slides here and talk about that kind of December to January switch.
Yeah, and so these are similar maps. And it's the one side of the screen. For me, it's the left. We're looking at both field seasons once again. And so the top is our first field season, and the bottom is our second this past winter field season. And so on the left side, we're looking at those same GPS locations, but only ones collected from deployment when we put those birds out, say sometime November, very early December, and then it runs through the end of the year, December 31st. So on the left, we got both those years. You can see each year we do have one or two, maybe three birds that move further south before this time period.
In the December period, right? You're seeing one or two move to Arkansas, kind of Oklahoma before the December 31st period. Yeah.
Yep. Just a few. And you can really see, I don't know, can you see my cursor on here?
I can. I don't know if viewers can. We'll let you know later on.
Gotcha. We'll see.
Yeah.
This past winter was, say overall, at least before we got into January, was quite mild in southeast Kansas. And so you can really see here our sites. We really didn't have much movement kind of within southeast Kansas or out of it. We had, it looks like 3 birds leave the area. But in general, by our sites, they were staying put. Compared to our first year, where, like I said, somewhat misleading because these are just points, but we did have a few birds decide to go up to Nebraska. Makes it look like a lot of locations, but this is just 1 or 2 birds making these jumps up to Nebraska. But
yeah, so just for a clarification and not to jump in, I'm just trying to make sure viewers, if they're looking at this and listeners, there's like this cluster of points in southeast Kansas where they marked them. And if you got a point over a point over a point over a point, you can't get a feel for how many points are there. But then like there's a few birds that go up to Nebraska and there's a lot of points, but they're separated from each other so you can see them. So it looks like a lot of activity when it's it's not a density thing. And I think, Ethan, you've got some density maps of how many points are in a location later in this where folks will be able to see that too. So again, if you folks want to see this stuff, jump on the YouTube channel and have a look at us.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps paint a good picture, but it's not perfect all the time.
For sure. Yeah.
But yeah, looking on the right side, I'm trying to minimize this so I can actually see. Let's see if I can move this. Yeah, on the right-hand side, then we're looking at again for both those field seasons, just GPS locations collected from January 1st through the end of January. And so you can really see, we'll start with this first one up top, the 23-24 season. Let's say a mass exodus of birds moving south/east. You can see, for example, the one that was still hanging out up in Nebraska moved back down south, and then all sorts of different birds deciding to jump further south and move, whether it be through/into Missouri or down into Arkansas and settle on kind of the Arkansas River. And you can see here for some of them, like I said, we have a theme of them following the Neosho River down kind of into Oklahoma, where it transitions into the, I guess there it's the Arkansas River. But then it eventually turns into the Arkansas River. But some of them just hopped right on down over kind of the Ozark country of Arkansas and settled onto the river.
And some of them ended up in the Delta too, but not as many as that settled kind of like Ozark and Arkansas River-ish, like
absolutely
moving that way.
Yeah, we had this one on the other side that went down through Arkansas past the Delta, and it stayed right on the edge of the river by Tennessee. But cold event, we probably had one, two, three, maybe four birds eventually make their way to the Delta. But in general, if they came on down, vast majority of them settled kind of central state on the Arkansas River. All right, I'll hop down to this past winter. Like I said, this deployment, December 31st here on the left, really concentrated. We had 3 birds decide to move further south or east.
How many birds is that in that? Like it looks like nothing's happened except like 2 birds moved into Arkansas and 1 bird moved into Oklahoma. How many birds total in 24-25 during December was that you had markers
visualized on this map right here that my cursor's on? There's a total of probably about 65 ducks, and there's over 150, 200,000 locations on this map. You can't see it because they're so stacked on each other, but there's a ton.
And so what we're looking at is 24-25 last season from deployment through December 31st. And that is 3 ducks, right, that made a movement out of your southeast Kansas of 60?
Yep, 60 to 75, somewhere in that range. I'm blank on the exact number right now, to be honest. But...
And where I'm kind of going with this is like the comment of, you're at the Missouri latitude, right, for folks. I mean, this is everybody's always talks about Missouri ducks coming down, but ducks come everywhere to Arkansas and Louisiana and Mississippi. And so you're like a little corner of the world where they've kind of stacked up during December. And what's the next move? And you've had 3 of them move to that point in December to places further south in southeast Kansas. So and I'm kind of setting it up, obviously, but I tell you, if people look at the maps, I'm like not, and Ethan can tell me if I misinterpret anything, yell at me. I'm just trying to like give the flavor, because again, if people are just listening, I want them to have a sense of what's going on instead of being able to see it, So now talk about where they ended up in January of last year.
Yeah, and so then on the lower right, like I said, it's the same duck, same field season. We'll get to it in a bit, but we had a really strong cold event in early January, and you can see some of them stayed, but a lot of them decided to leave and go south/southeast when that cold event occurred. I mean, if you looked at this map in comparison, you would think there's probably, I don't know, at 10 times the number of locations on it, but it's really not. It's just that they were moving during this period. So in particular, if you can still see my cursor, this Neosho River, a lot of our birds like following that down. It's open water, it's moving water. So when the real strong cold event comes through and a lot of the wetlands freeze over, they kind of transition from being wetland mallards to river mallards for a period of time. So some of them will use it to navigate further south and southeast. Some of them will get on the river and kind of use it as a home base, if you will, while they're doing dry field feeding. But yeah, significant push of birds moving south, southeast, following it in the Neosho River down to the Arkansas River in Oklahoma, and then some following it also and ending up on the Arkansas River in kind of central Arkansas territory. I don't really think this cold event pushed any additional birds to the Delta, maybe one, but we still had this one that was there early that is still shown in the map here. But yeah, pretty intense shifts during that January period. It's all associated with the real strong, sharp weather event that occurs.
Yeah, and so you still had a lot of birds stay in Kansas, though, and that was a theme last year. And we saw the the images on social media of ducks floating down rivers and things like that. But we got told on social media that there was no duck migration, and we also get told that ducks don't migrate after the winter solstice because all they're doing is going back north. Which I've always said the only thing ducks are doing is going back north because they they only go as far south as they need to because they're going back north, right? But that doesn't mean that the shortest day of the year is the day they stop migrating because they still have to survive. And so from a long-term adaptability evolutionary standpoint, those ducks have, learned to move on bad conditions ahead of them so they don't die. So
yeah,
I don't feel like those types of things have changed, but I do want to ask, because I asked before, and I'm not setting this up because I don't know this. I looked at your maps at this meeting. I said, hey, Ethan, come on the podcast, talk about this stuff. But you said 3 of 60 moved in December. How many out of the ones you had moved in, what percentage, or how many do you think you moved in in that January cold?
I would say as far as ones that left Kansas itself, this is kind of a ballpark here. I don't have an exact number to give you, but I'd say probably 35 to 45%, somewhere under half, but still under half, but a chunk of them. And still, it's not greatly shown on the map here, but some of them, I mean, they didn't go that far. And so, for example, down here, if you can still see the cursor just into Oklahoma, it turns into a pretty big river system. There's a lot of reservoirs in that area. And so, I mean, they needed to find open water, and that's where they ended up at.
Yep. They're going as far as they have to.
Kind of the same story.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Same story here in Missouri. You start getting into a lot of different habitat development and small river systems in the region. So not all of them made a huge jump and went all the way down straight shot into central Arkansas. Some of them just moved a relatively short distance till they could find some open water.
Yeah, and that's consistent. Like Winus Point, where we were just at in Northwest Ohio, those guys talk about those birds bop down to the Ohio River Valley or maybe halfway down Ohio till they can find open water. And they said they actually come back too. They'll show back up later on, especially early in the season. But this is a nice graphic. I do appreciate it. Again, I have always wanted you on, and you happen to be at the same meeting as me, and I'm like, man, we got to show people this stuff because, and I at the end of your talk, I'm like, I'm like raising my hand, like, ooh, like a kid in class. And it was, Ethan, so just so we're aware, ducks do migrate after the winter solstice. And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, this presentation gave me the warm and fuzzy because, Ryan Askren from Five Oaks was behind me and he's just chuckling. And I'm like, yeah, I've got to just trust the weather severity index because it's not perfect, but it's still telling us when these birds move. And I got to quit looking at social media with people saying, there's no ducks here. There's no ducks here. So, and as I've always said, I think there's a ton of duck hunters out there, and man, take offense if you want, but maybe you just suck at duck hunting. And it's tongue in cheek, but, but when the weather gets shitty, ducks move, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, it depends a lot on where you're at. Like I said, both winters for the most part, before we get into January, Southeast Kansas have been fairly mild. But both years we've had early January, these real quick events and stuff happens during that. But before that time comes, there's not really much ice, might be a little bit of skim ice here and there, but takes a real strong event, and when that happens, they definitely responds. But just kind of the way the past 2 winters have played out.
Yeah, and it's been really short. I think you've got you got the weather. There it is, the weather stuff. So last year, October to December, across the country, and this was definitely for the Mississippi Flyway, was the warmest October to December in 130 years. And then
Hmm.
we got this like really sharp thing right later on, in early January, and ducks responded to it. But it's pretty short lived, and I think that's what you're showing here, Ethan.
Yeah. So this is a temperature graph. It's data from Pleasanton, Kansas, which is kind of on the Missouri border in the central part of that southeast zone. Both field seasons are on here. The pink one is 23-24, and the blue one's 24-25.
Hmm.
And it's just plotting by dates the daily average temperature, which I guess visually gives kind of a good idea of it's not a high, it's not a low, it's throughout the day. What was the average temp? And so you can see for both field seasons, kind of from where this starts in mid to late November, um, fairly mild for the winter. There's some variability, but I mean, you're seeing daily average temps, getting close to 40, above 40, generally probably above freezing or near it.
Hmm.
So not much ice conditions. And then, like I said, for both field seasons, we get into early January and really rapidly a cold event occurs. And so I'll start with the 23-24, but January 14th was kind of the peak of it. But I mean, you look, let's see, 1, 2, 3 days or so before January 14th,
Hmm.
you had a daily average temperature of what was it? Probably around 35. Till you go 3 or 4 days later, your daily average temperature is below 0 Fahrenheit. Pretty rapid, extreme temperature drop. And it was also associated with snow and ice. And so, man, that was intense. There's ice cover everywhere. All the water was freezing. Even slow moving parts of the Mallard River were freezing over. So that first year, that's kind of when we saw our first, man, like a weather event like this comes through. There are definitely some of them they're going to try to get out of here. Not all of them, but some of them. And
Hmm.
of the ones that decide to stay, they move considerably within southeast Kansas, even if they end up staying within the region, because the wetlands that they're used to using freeze over. So they have to be adaptable, whether it's going to power plant lake or a river system that's deep enough with fast enough water it doesn't freeze. Um, they need to find something.
Hmm.
And then hopping into this past winter, similar story, kind of that cold dip occurred about a week earlier. But similar deal, not quite as extreme, but relatively. I mean, you went from daily average temperature of somewhere around 35, 33 degrees to jumping down to, single digits. That one was sustained for about 3 days.
Hmm.
Um, and both of these, they're not long lasted. It's kind of a real sharp, extreme drop. It's about 3, maybe 4 days where it's like that, and then it picks right back up. But yeah, both years, even though it's a week apart, we've seen a very similar response to when those cold events occur.
Yeah, and the weather severity index, I said it, I think on the I kind of introduced you a little bit on the last one and said we're going to have Ethan Dittmer on, and he's got these GPS unit birds, and like the weather severity index that we produce on the podcast, like predicted those movements that you saw to the day.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't all depart at the same time, but you know, it's honestly a catch-all. Like it's predicting these movements of birds. So
Yeah.
we just get a lot of chatter about, mallards are just calendar migrants because they're here at the opening of season, and it's just way more variable than that. That's not the world we work in. As folks studying these critters, we know they're different, but the reality is that this stuff is causing bird movement, and some of these are really short, and so I honestly think with more, especially as you move into the years where productivity is lower and there's more adults in the population, there's adults that have learned to, sit stuff out. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think it'd take a lot to look at hatcher birds versus after hatcher, but I think I asked that question, are they acting differently? Because I'd expect like a seasoned bird maybe to be able to think about sticking it out where a hatchier bird would leave. But on the alternative of that, a young bird might just not know what it's doing and try to stick it out.
Yeah.
Whereas, right, and then you've got an older bird that lived through it before and says, screw this, I'm getting out of town. So I almost feel like it's a 50-50 on that too, right? I think there's a lot of variability in these birds. And we see that. And again, you saw 50% of your birds move on these systems and 50% of them stay. And that's about what I would expect. But I think what folks can expect on these weather systems is, a good chunk of the birds to start moving south. I mean, think about this. If there's 6.5 million birds in the flyway, well, let's just say on the continent and a big giant system comes across, right? And then they move. Well, that's a lot of birds. If it's 10 million birds, 10 million mallards, well, you're going to see a lot more birds too. So the population matters, plus the weather. And these things obviously play off each other. So yeah, thanks for moving me along. Let's look at so these are the kernel density estimates of pretty much where the ducks spent their time between early in winter and late in winter, right?
Yep. These kind of help paint a simple picture. They're very simple kernel density estimates. We don't even have to worry about the color. Just the hotter it is, the more concentrated their density is. But this is from this past winter. And so you look on the left side, we have all of our locations included in these kernel density estimates from deployment through January 5th. You can see, very centered around some of our deployment locations. You can see one little blip of one that came down here early in Louisiana. You can barely see it factoring into the kernel density, but man, they're really stacked in on some of our deployment sites. And then you hop on the other side, you're looking at same exact birds, same data, but January 6th through February 15th, and rapid change. You have birds moving down Neosho River system, jumping into Oklahoma, good chunk of them ending up on the Arkansas or Arkansas River, depending on where you're at, and then some as well jumping over to Missouri. But this is something I like to talk about with hunters, of just the general concept of where we are at in the world. I hear it from people of mallards are just showing up to Southeast Kansas in late January. And simply put, both from this project and my own experiences hunting or watching ducks, not really the case. I'm sure you probably do have some new birds coming into the region in January, but a lot of what you're seeing, and I think these maps demonstrate it phenomenally, is when one of those big weather events comes through, the birds that have been there, some of them are leaving, so you'll see movement from that. But the vast majority of them are making movements. Whether they end up leaving the region or not, they're exploring the landscape, trying to find some type of open water so that they can stay there if they want to. So while you probably see a lot of birds flying and doing different things you hadn't seen before, a huge proportion of that, and I would argue the vast majority, is birds that had been in the area for quite some time, and all of a sudden they're having to make movements that they did not make before. So it appears a lot of new ducks are showing up. It's probably some, but I would say most of it's just birds that have been there. They're moving, trying to navigate that landscape.
Yeah, that's a good point. Redistribution is a real thing. And I can tell you, I've seen migrating ducks, and it was on Lake Erie where they're coming out of northwestern Ontario and Manitoba right. So this is kind of the first big body of water these birds would hit. And there were waves. This was like a late November thing, waves of snow and then sun and then waves of snow. And right after the wave of snow and the northwest wind, you'd hear tundra swans, and you'd see tundra swans dropping out of the stratosphere. And then you better get your gun up, because like right behind them were pintails and mallards, and it was one of the most insane hunts. And you would just hear like fighter jets, and these are ducks with their wings pointed straight down, Ethan.
Oh, yeah.
And they're behind the tundra swans, and then their next wave of snow would come, and they're just in those like little pockets of that weather out of the Northwest, and they're just flying with it the whole time. And those ducks want nothing other than to get out of that sky and sit on the water, because they've probably been up there for a very long time, over, hundreds, if not thousands of miles of distance to get on the right wind and get there. And so I'd say there are times in the Deep South that I've seen that when I've hunted there. There are very few. I feel like these ducks make like these short, lower elevation, lower kind of elevation in the sky kind of jumps lots of times among these places. And kind of once they make those big movements on the early systems into the mid latitudes, they start to make these kind of, I would say, smaller jumps that are less distance and more predictable of where they're going to end up, I think. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to tell people that sometimes you've got local movement, but if you're sitting in your blind and ducks are coming from all directions and you're not seeing like a major movement out of the Northwest or due north or such in that kind of fashion, that you're probably seeing a local reshuffling of ducks, which I think lots of times is more common for people than they think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends on where you're at, but like these maps kind of show, if you're a hunter in southeast Kansas, probably a lot of those birds you're seeing when these cold events, these extreme ones come through in January, they are probably mostly ducks that have been there, just considering how far north southeast Kansas is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're down in Oklahoma or Arkansas and one of these weather events comes through southeast Kansas region, you're probably going to see at least a chunk of quote unquote migrating birds, but they're coming from southeast Kansas. So I guess it depends on where you're at a lot of times of what you're seeing. Just because, I mean, there's a different story, I guess, of when these weather events come through, if you're in southeast Arkansas versus southeast Kansas, simply based upon the difference north to south.
Yeah, variation is what's going on. And I think, I don't know, it's one of the reasons we produce the podcast. I really want to get the good information into people's hands and give them kind of like the best days to hunt. The Western Tennessee stuff from Reelfoot Lake shows that like every blind is occupied every single day. And guess what? Every single day isn't a great duck hunting day. So
Yep.
I really think we can hunt less and shoot more. I really do. And have a better experience. I think a lot of lack of satisfaction from folks is maybe going all the time and expecting something to be different than the day before when it was warm the day before and it's warm today. So,
yeah. No, I mean, for me, when I'm down in southeast Kansas doing my field work, we don't hunt much like during the fall and winter because we're too busy working trying to catch ducks.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, during that time, if we hunt, it's only going to be on like a great day. Just because, I don't know, we're busy. If we want to go out and hunt, put that effort in, we want it to be a good hunt. Now afterwards, once we're done with our field work and stuff, I'll hunt a lot more, but I'm traveling around, going to different places all the time, trying to keep it interesting.
There you go. And I'm not going to vilify people that want to go every day, hang out with friends, drink their coffee, eat their little Debbies, all that. But you also can't expect to do that and be in your blind every day and popping at a bird here and there every day, and then expect it to be amazing when there's guns going off every single day in a place that ducks want to be. As I've always said, don't expect to see ducks, like if you're surveying or doing whatever, ducks don't hang out in front of blinds where guns are going off. So
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah.
We're not,
No, I agree.
some of this stuff isn't rocket science, but Ethan, a little bit, really appreciate the research you're doing. It's insights for Kansas folks, as well as, folks to the South, and understanding it's really bringing that regional knowledge, like that really good West Tennessee stuff as well. I think all this combined is shedding a lot of light on how birds move and kind of what we should expect as hunters, but also thinking about maybe, how we conserve these birds too, and conserve hunting, as part of our culture, which feeds back into quality duck populations. But I do want to shift gears a little bit and wrap up here with kind of, you are on the cusp of being, if you aren't already, a full-blown professional. I feel like I'm talking to a colleague, Ethan. So it's you're on your path, to winning the fight here and getting your doctorate degree and moving on to the next
Trying.
great job. Man, if I could do it all over again, I'd do a lot of it, but some of the PhD stuff was rough, and and you know it and you're in it, so I can appreciate where you're at and the hard work it takes to be where you're at. I tell you, I saw that you weren't doing backpacks, you're doing sewn on telemetry units, which you said takes you're up to like 3:30 in the morning sometimes doing attachments of these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's days I don't get to sleep during the night, so it all depends. But yeah, it's field work for this project's very intensive.
Okay.
Very intensive, both between the miles we have to travel,
Hmm.
and then just the pseudo-surgical aspect of it. I'm not complaining at all. I'm just being honest about it.
Oh
If I
yeah,
didn't
yeah, yeah.
like it, I would not be doing it, but it's a good thing I like what I'm doing.
Hey man, we've all been through a lot of it, right? So
Yeah.
I get it, I get it. And kudos for pushing through and doing the good work for the Ducks and for all of us. But let's jump on critical life lessons learned to date. And, kind of what have you learned that's you feel has aided you in your career moving forward, other than just push through and work till 3:30 in the morning? There's got to be something that you feel has been beneficial to you that you might be able to pass on to others.
I I think probably one of the biggest things I've learned, and I think applicable to many people thinking about going to grad school or in grad school, is if you're going to do like a grad project, or I guess probably any job for that matter, you got to do something that you are personally interested in so that you yourself invest in it.
Mm,
Just I've seen it through all walks of life, the difference between someone that like is doing something because it's what they love to do versus it's just like a step, or this is just a job I have to do in the meantime. You have to live in the moment and do what you like to do, and then it doesn't feel like work. It's just a path that you're on. And I'd say that's the most important thing I've learned, is to make sure that the work I'm doing, just need to make sure it's stuff that I like to do and I'm
hmm.
personally invested in, because it makes such a big difference in the quality of the work and the relationships you can build with people. Because if you feel like you're passionate about it and you love it, other people can tell. And it ends up paying off in dividends down the roads. So I'd say that's probably overall the most important thing. And so many things come alongside that. If you do great work, you love it, you're passionate about it, people can see that. You end up making relationships with colleagues and other people, and hopefully you get the chance to work with them. But it's really important to be passionate about what you do and find a good fit.
Yeah, wake up every day, and if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yeah, some days are rough, but hopefully that's
It
some
still
days,
feels
not
like
most
work.
days.
Yeah. Ethan, I say that, and one of my mentors, Guy Baldessari, who wrote the book on waterfowl ecology and management, along with Eric Bolin from Texas, and then did the most recent update to ducks, geese, and swans. That was his comment: was if you work with birds, you'll never feel like you've worked a day in your life. And the reality is that I think if you work with birds and you're passionate about it and you work really hard, it's going to feel like you work sometimes.
Yes, sometimes it does, for sure. There's a grinds.
Yeah. Uh it's always a fun one, I think, is if this wasn't your career path, what else would you be doing? I was going to be a military kid. I did end up going into forestry and then found birds later, but what would you be doing?
Realistically, probably hardwood floor install and refinishing. As out there as that is growing up, my dad owned a couple companies where that was his job, and my
Hmm.
mom owned a pottery store. And growing up, I mean, work-wise, that's kind of where it seemed like it was going. Eventually, my brother and I would take over my dad's business, but when we got closer to being in college, he sat us down and bluntly told us, like, you can make a good living.
Hmm.
It's not the worst work, but it's extremely physical. And he said, if I was you guys, I would go to college and find something you love to do, because you don't want to be 50, 60 years old and still working with floors. It beats you up and it's hard work. So realistically, that's probably what I'd be doing if I didn't go down this field. It's quite a contrast for sure.
Yeah, well, take care of yourself and your body. I don't, listeners won't see it, but, and maybe you did. I've been like shifting around the chair. I jacked my back up doing firewood last weekend, and
Oh no.
I got a whole pile of giant black cherries sitting next to the wood splitter that I don't even know if I can roll over there right now. And I need wood in the house for the winter, and it's kind of a mess right now. So I'm trying to do ibuprofen and get myself like swelling down and back on schedule. But you can both be an academic and F your body up, just so you're aware.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh
stay
yeah.
in shape too, right? Like don't just sit behind the desk as well. I
Yeah.
think that's part of it, is keep that physical health up as well. I love my blue collar friends. It's where I come from in Western New York, Buffalo region, and my family. I wouldn't trade what I do for anything, but I still try to keep my foot in, the hard labor portion of it. And I deeply appreciate those folks that do that every damn day and then stay healthy and through their career for sure. Like that is just such a core of this country in general. And almost everybody, Ethan, that I talk to says if I wasn't in academia, I'd just be using my hands. So I love it. I love it.
Yeah. No, I still try to do some floor work here or there, whether it's helping out my dad or just some random friend that needs some help. And I think it's important that everyone at some point in their life does some work like that, because it could give you some perspective on what real, true, hard physical work can be, day in and day out. Yeah, respects, to say the least.
Yeah, if anybody's applying to my program and their parents coddled them and they haven't done anything like drive a tractor, run a chainsaw, put in hardwood flooring, then you better get after it, because it's hard for me to find somebody that I feel like can go through the daily grind in our world without having done some of that stuff too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it makes a difference for sure.
Well, Ethan, as you saw, we've got a bunch of additional questions here that are kind of nitpicky about, other things, but we got you to talk a lot about your research this time. And so we won't get you into the State of the Birds document or anything like that.
Right.
We're glad that waterfowl are doing well relative to other species in that recent State of the Birds document put out. And it's because of people like you and the people before you, that did that good work of why waterfowl are doing better than sometimes other birds. So really appreciate you and keep on the really good path you're on. I sometimes end with some advice for students, and I think mine for you is find some time to take it easy and understand your limits, because I saw you and you push yourself harder than most doctoral students that I've seen, including myself. And so, take some time for yourself, find that balance is the biggest thing, right? Because, your physical and mental health are as important as your project. So
No, I agree.
be aware with that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I try to take it easier during the summer if I can, kind of counterbalance. But yeah, I know what you're saying for sure. I appreciate that.
And you got 1 year left, right, Ethan?
Yes. 1 year left for the PhD field work.
Good stuff. Well, good luck with it and be safe out there. And really appreciate you being on the final episode for this year. I think we're going to do this again next year. There's lots of great students out there, and we'll see what the schedule holds. But thanks for being the finale of the Young Waterfowl Professional Series with us on the FowlWeather podcast, Ethan. Appreciate you.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks for having me.